Good morning. I welcome you to the second panel discussion in the series AI at Work, brought to you by the Hindu Group in association with IBM. Today, we are looking at governance in the age of agentic AI. I have with me today Rohit Kilam, Chief Technology Officer, HDFC Life Insurance Company, Premraj Avasthi, Head of IT and CIO, GIC Housing Finance Limited, Pushkal Tenjerla, Head of IT Security at RBL Bank, and Rajesh Malhotra, Senior Leader, Data and AI, India and South Asia for IBM. Today's conversation gains prominence and importance because through this year, we've had a series of great leaps in the sphere of agentic AI. We've had multiple frameworks for agentic AI. AI companies have released design patterns for agentic AI, how to develop agentic AI applications, and so on. And we've also seen the rash of releases of agentic AI browsers as well from consumer companies. Having said this, recently there have been a series of reports that say that a lot of AI projects, particularly Gen AI projects, fail. And it looks like the places where there has been some success, those successes have come from agentic applications, particularly in the technology sphere, where agentic AI is used to generate code and software applications. Having said that, whole world of agentic AI applications that are already there and that are also possible. And I want to today explore some of the governance limits that are needed for agentic applications, particularly in the area of banking, financial services, and insurance. So, to all my guests, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Rajesh, thank you for being here to represent IBM. And we will look forward to your experience with your multiple clients as well. And to our guests today, uh, I know that this is an area where it's fraught with danger, so to speak. Yours is an industry where security is paramount, governance is paramount, and you are a part of a very highly regulated industry. And more often than not, technology moves much faster than the law does. And I want to make sure that we are in a safe space. Uh, if you do not want to answer a question that I'm asking, please say so, and we'll respect that. Now, McKinsey's 2024 State of AI in Financial Services reported that nearly 40% of global banks are already piloting autonomous or semi autonomous AI systems. Yet, fewer than 15% have formal governance frameworks for them. This basically makes the point that technology is going much faster than rules and regulations and the law. Classical AI systems in BFSI predicted outcomes, but the difference with agentic AI is that agentic AI also acts, which essentially means that it can trigger a lot of compliance, risk, and governance claims. So, we are no longer governing static models, but adaptive systems which have intent. And that is the first theme for today's discussion. We have three themes today. This is the first theme, agentic AI and the governance challenge. So let's start here. How does agentic AI, and I'm making it particular, how does agentic AI change the fundamental nature of governance in BFSI? We are now governing systems of intent rather than output. So in this context, Rohit, would you like to start, please?
Thank you. Uh, I think what has happened is with the era of agentic technologies, we are seeing a transition from slower governance to a faster governance, right? When I'm talking about slower governance, we are looking at principle, ethics, guidelines to a faster governance where there is continuous monitoring, there is embedded governance in everything. It's more like telemetry. It's like when you're running an aircraft, nobody manages it from the base airport, right? It is managed then and there itself. That's the mindset shift which is happening with agentic AI. You have to look at a much more optimized and embedded governance going forward. How do you do this? There's obviously one way in which you give complete autonomy to the agents and they're completely on their own, or you keep a human in the loop to do this, or you keep a human on the loop the where the humans audit it periodically going forward. All the three options are available to us. Organizations are attempting, based on the use cases, each of these frameworks to look at. It could be completely autonomous for a very simple calculated agentic equation, right? I just need to give a code to someone, right? And it's a simple calculation, 2 or 3 step calculations, which is very deterministic, can be done. I can just leave it to the agent, right? Then comes where there are gray areas, where there is a human in the loop who finally approves it in that sense, right? And the third is where, okay, I leave it to you, but I will audit it later on. So there is complete traceability built on top of it. So that's the paradigm that we are moving on to.
Thank you. Uh, Premraj, your views?
So, thank you for having me here, first of all. With the concept of AI coming into picture and then theme of compliance and regulations also to be, catered to using agentic AI, there's a whole plethora of policies that this AI can cater to. But then policies are always uh, in terms of not only regulations, companies have their own policies as well, right? Credit policies, and then there are recovery policies. So all these policies, they can't be just left alone for any AI to decide and act on. That is the danger area what you're referring to. There has to be a moderation in place where the AI has to learn the aspects of human intent running the policies, and also the trust to be built on the other side, who has to act on the alerts or any restrictions that this AI line of run is posing on them, right? This moderation will always help AI to know what are its limitations, which boundary they should not, this bots should not be crossing, right? So, very simple example, we are into our transformation phase of legacy systems. So, credit policies, when they are being built into the systems, rule engines, they themselves act as agentic uh, stepwise controls, in the flow of lending business. So, I can have those rules defined for agents to identify the points of restrictions and give the alerts. But then there are places where the human intelligence has to come into picture, the human aspect of reality has to come into picture, and then the process, the run has to be enlightened, saying this is something that can be taken forward. So we call it deviations from the original run. So yeah, I think moderation, what sir is referring to, is very important to have control over.
Thank you. Pushkal?
Before I start, my views are personal based on industry experience, not that of RBL Bank. But having said that, great point. Thank you, Rohit and Premraj. I think as we go forward, what happens is that we are not just governing the technology part of agentic AI or AI. we need to govern the behavioral part of it. And as on the light panel they said, that in my view has to go into another layer within that agentic AI. Am I doing this right? And human in the middle can never be eliminated. Call it deviations, call it outliers, but that intelligence also has to be built to that, because we have to govern the behavioral part, how that affects the ultimate outcome of it, and the guardrails that are being built. And as you rightly said, Nagaraj, technology is moving faster than the legislation, but it's up to us in the industry to ensure that we foresee what's coming up. We build guardrails in advance so that we don't fall off. Nobody can, no industry can survive today's world without agentic AI, all the flavors of it. The bad guys have it, so
Correct.
the good guys need to have it.
Yeah.
We should be a step further in that. That's my take on that first point that we.
Yeah. Rohit, I was quite struck by your analogy of how airplane control system works, and it kind of uh, illustrates that while we push computing to the edges, um, perhaps it's now time to push governance to the edges.
Absolutely. So I think telemetry is that, and when we build systems, when we build, and this word I'm borrowing from software reliability engineering specifically. When we are looking at telemetry, we are looking at understanding and monitoring each and every corner of our systems. Each and every corner, we should know. We should be able to monitor periodically. We should be able to have the guardrails in. We should have a method of, again, an agent supervisor who is enforcing this on the existing set of agents. The agent supervisor itself orchestrates and ensures that this is being done. That involves a lot of synthetic work with respect to agents, and that brings the traceability and also testability in terms of uh, scenarios, right? There are lots of what if scenarios which can be tested in a synthetic manner using using telemetry in that sense.
Right. That actually leads me to a question that I have on my sheet here, which is um, how what is the difference that you see uh, in the new environment with agents compared to what you've already been doing with classical AI and machine learning algorithms and rule engines that we've used rule engines forever now. And then, of course, ML is somewhat recent comparatively. But these are all, uh, especially in your industry, these are all very, very data heavy. And when we look at pushing governance to the edges, we are talking about even more data that is being generated only for the purposes of governance.
Correct. So I think that traceability is something, and explainability and traceability is extremely important for the agentic framework, without which we will never be able to trust or reduce our risk surface area to that extent, right? So we need to reduce our risk surface area with agents. If there is a rogue agent, how do I reduce my risk surface area, right? That's the point. And for that, traceability as well as explainability into the agentic framework. When we're talking about a lot of telemetry, we're also talking about tons of logging data from these
Yes.
agents, which needs to be monitored. And to monitor them well, we need to organize that logging data extremely well and apply agents on top of it to understand the behavioral as well as data discrepancies which are happening. So how do you identify an agent has gone wrong or has gone rogue? You will have to look at the behavior of the agent, and that will come from the specific logging data and the traceability of that agent going forward.
Surface of exposure will continue to expand. It will grow. It will never diminish. And as you write, you are heading the digital part, and the digital assets are becoming more, I should say, intelligent in their own selves. traditional ML can only do so much. That's uh, controversial to say, but that's not catching up in that sense. Agentic AI, embedded supervisory control, knowing your assets is the key there. Every asset, call it whatever way you, every CI, or in technical terms, or every asset, first of all, should be identifiable. We should know the linkages in that. And then, as Rohit rightly said, the traceability can be established. The core of that in technical parlance is the CMDB, the heart of it, the linkages. Where will it get affected? How is your AI or agentic AI intelligent enough to drill down to the core where things are going wrong? And that's the intelligence the markets have to develop, regardless of the industry, and definitely in heavily regulated industries.
Premraj?
Like both the gentlemen already have mentioned, the traceability is the key. Unless you are not able to trace where your agentic robot or non-agentic robot both have gone wrong, okay, they will follow the guidelines that we have asked them to perform in. Okay, they will learn from what we are feeding them in terms of moderation. But unless and until what they perform and what we feed them are not logged and traced, if there's no one who's able to supervise and understand the point of pain where things have gone wrong, because there the person who is supervising has also to be, will also be have to be intelligent enough to identify, okay, that was wrong, that particular point was wrong. So it is more of uh, guidelines, a framework that has to be devised within the business domain and within the functioning. Plus, there are other parameters which has to be considered, like sir mentioned about assets. There would be more onto assets which are non-environment, assets which are not pertaining to your environment. They don't belong to your environment, but they have breached into your environment.
Third party.
So all this traceability, along with solutions which are coming handy from market, who are able to help you identify such wrongdoings in your programs. Only then it is possible to have boundary control on the
Right.
functioning of those robots.
Something you said struck me in terms of the the fact that there has to be somebody who's intelligent to look at this and say this should not have happened, or this should have happened this way. Um, and Rohit earlier mentioned an supervisor of agents. Now, that supervisor of agents, Rohit, I'm not sure whether you intended that to be a software agent by itself or whether you intended to be a human agent. But I thought it's interesting that the two things that each of you said go towards the same point, which is that there has to be some aspect of knowledge, some aspect of training, and both of these require memory. From an agentic viewpoint, and gentlemen, you should correct me if I'm wrong, and Rajesh, you should as well. As of now, one of the key downsides that I'm seeing in the agentic systems is that number one, there is not enough memory. I don't mean technical memory, I mean the memory of that knowledge. And I also see that they have to be trained deliberately again. We speak about self-healing systems and self-training systems, but I don't think they are yet at a point where if I were to take Rohit's supervisor of agents to be a software agent, we're not there yet. We can still do anomalies, we can still do error detections, but what do these errors mean and what downstream actions will happen? It looks like it still needs human beings. So your opinions, please.
it will need human intervention in terms of, so everything is data, right? And right now it is unstructured. If I have to say India, we still are into unstructured data. We are digitizing, we are transforming. We are coming to an age where we will have structured data. Structure is one piece. Second is availability of this data to learn and understand. So, me being from housing finance industry, I am a single company who's collecting my own data. There are other housing finance companies working through Pan India. They have their own data, they have their own learning. Such, and the data that we are talking about, when where compliance and policies are to be enforced, right? And but have to be in perspective of running the business, not obstraining the business. So the learnings have to come on shared basis. Very simple example, if I have to give, uh, credit policies. Again, I'll come to that topic. Region wise, these policies change because region wise the way lending business runs in India changes. Somewhere it is land plus property getting sold. Somewhere in city like Mumbai metro cities, we have flats. We do owning a land and property is a different thought at all. So there are different kinds of policies that are running behind this, and then deciding the eligibility and the lending amount, and coming to the decision of lending that particular amount, right? All those decisions not only go with data, but they also go again with the situation, with the aspect of the party who's asking for money, what situation that party is into, and all those aspects coming into consideration along with policies. When policies are to be meant, right, there has to be this learning given to the AI robot, that these are the situations where certain policies with certain considerations have to be thought about. So behavioral, there might be certain aspect of situational to be given as learning, and then the built of trust for the moderator, uh, the person who's supervising, right, his intelligence when comes into play. And when I say I'm finding a rogue, so robot itself won't be rogue, but the deduction of robot, right, in terms of what was fed to the AI robot in terms of data, and what he had to deduce out of those data for the outcome, that might have gone wrong, and we say, okay, that was the wrong decision. That is where the intelligence of the person who's supervising the AI would come into picture, and they would go into depth of understanding and correcting the decision where things would have been managed. So that is where AI also would learn. So that is how we'll build trust with AI, and the users of this particular AI would build trust on the engine. Otherwise, it will always be human driven. Even though I implement this uh, AI agentic robo, I still will depend on paperwork.
All right. Rohit?
No, so from our standpoint, I think earlier systems are very deterministic, and now we are moving to non-deterministic systems. And we are moving to non-deterministic systems, uh, keeping 100% risk area under control is not humanly possible, right? So it has to be an agent, supervisor, who's going to do this. And on top of that, yes, human on the loop will be there to look at anomalies. That's fine. But an agent supervisor will at least ensure 100% coverage, which is not possible humanly. Now, coming to the question of memory, right? So, I don't need the memory. If I am intelligent enough, if my agent is intelligent enough, right, it will learn from the data and apply. Why do I need to keep all the logs? Why do I need to keep the memory logs of last 10 years if I am able to understand that set of, uh, you know, data well and put it in my
Oh,
intelligence.
sorry to interrupt. I just want to clarify because we can get a better answer from you. So I probably should have defined memory a bit better. Uh, I don't mean memory in terms of you should know, you should have 10 years of data or you have access to a humongous amount of
Yeah, that's a tech bias.
data.
Sorry.
Yeah. So I don't mean it that. I do mean though that uh, to the extent that you detected an anomaly sometime back, that sometime back could be within the last month, it could be within the last week, it could be within the last 24 hours. I am also assuming that some labeling was done if that was something that the system couldn't detect as a
Yeah.
particular type of error.
Yeah.
It just puts it in some bucket and a human being looks at it and says it is this kind of error. I'm talking about that memory. I'm not talking about the data part of the memory.
Yeah,
I'm
so
talking about the learning part of the memory.
it's a big cost versus benefit conundrum,
Perfect.
right? That's the call, right? If I keep giving unlimited memory, for example, to ChatGPT, right? You can imagine the cost of running ChatGPT across. So similarly for agents, right? How much memory can I give him? How much of current memory versus
Yes.
an archival memory can I give him to build that intelligence? It's a cost benefit. Depending on the use case, depending on how deep the data is required, there you go. You don't need to. I can't generalize or whitewash it
Correct.
with a specific rule of thumb.
Understood. Understood. But it's a good perspective to have. Thank you. Rajesh, I have two questions for you based on whatever we discussed right now.
Sure.
One question is my original question around memory and training and all of that. The second part of it is you deal with multiple types of customers, and today we have with us CXOs of established companies
Sure.
that have become digital, and you also deal with companies in the same space that are digital native. Uh, I'm assuming that you see differences in the way these two types of companies approach the same problems. So, two parts.
So while um to the BFSI industry, compliances and the government guidelines might have additional implications, but by and large, when I'm moving into an deterministic process earlier using a workflow engine to a non-deterministic process where I'm building this workflow with agents, right? I'm bringing in some bit of autonomy into the process. So trust becomes a very important aspect in terms of being able to you know uh, let the process run autonomously, right? It's like having a new employee come on board and I say, can I hand over the task to him without overseeing? So it's almost akin to that with an agent, right? But all the same, when you are hitting autonomy, you also need to monitor autonomously, right? Like what Rohit mentioned, right? That you have an aircraft running at that speed with so many data points being thrown out there. It is not possible to manually monitor, manage the and control your guardrail. So you have to build guardrails. You have to build. So I think automating the whole governance process itself is a very important activity, which Rohit mentioned as a agent. What here we are talking about, obviously, doing many things. One is monitoring this entire process in an automated way so that we are having some bit of self auditing happening, right? We are looking at also building audit trails, right? Because like, whatever we are doing with agents or with Gen AI or with the traditional ML, I am answerable to my regulators, and building auditability becomes very important. If I don't do telemetry, I will not collect information. If I don't collect, I will not build auditability. So collection, building the outliers from the guardrail, and then recording it and keeping it becomes essential for me to and then this process itself helps me continuously build on to my optimization of this process, because I can keep changing my guardrails to optimize my process. It is like, again, going back to the same individual, right? I am whom I allow him to say, okay, you can take a decision up to 2,000 rupees. Now I say, oh no, I am more confident now, you can take up 10,000 rupees. Right. So it's exactly the same thing when it comes to an autonomous process, right? That way. So I think automated monitoring definitely possible, and systems coming up. Compliance related auditability, right? Compliances will keep coming in. DPDP tomorrow, today something else tomorrow. We already have many compliances. How do automatically build these compliance checks? So I think that's how I see automating governance
The
becoming an
main
important.
difference between banking, financial services sectors and other sectors is the way we view the equation between risk and trust. Here we look at risk more, we pay more emphasis on risk because you're dealing with money, you're dealing with other people's money. And how do you reduce risk, or how do you manage risk at the end of the day? Consumer industries, how do you build trust? It's all about building trust going forward. Maybe manufacturing for some of the industry is more about risk of health or risk of things like that. So that's the perspective from a risk and trust standpoint, and applicability of that to AI agentic framework as well. When you look at AI agentic framework from risk standpoint, you have a very different lens to look at it, and the guardrails that you build are very different versus the consumer industry looking at building trust.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Operational risks are there for everyone,
Yeah.
but then they keep changing.
Keep changing the lens
from a
and the
lens keeps changing.
kind of governance you framework you apply on agentic technology also changes with the lens that you apply.
Pushkal, we just before we came in and sat here, we we had this interesting conversation around risk and trust, where I was casually speaking about risk metrics versus trust metrics, and you had a very interesting point to make. Can you share us?
So I was waiting for you to ask me that. Why will the general public who invest or work with the firm unless I trust? Right. Hindu, IBM, HDFC. These are people who probably have built the trust over decades. Right. Now, risk is absolutely important. Risk management, I would say. That's where agentic AI can help us to align to frameworks that are there in the market. SEBI, IRDI, RBI, and now we have this new NCIPC coming in with their own lens. You name it. These technologies can be used to frame our governance around these frameworks, and also probably some are overlapping. That debate can go on till the late night. But end of the day, we should use this agentic AI technology for that. Having said that, you cannot keep dated data in that. If you query it today, and if you query it after 1 year, what should be the response? So that data memory or whatever you call it, or some form, especially in lending business, has to continue. That's my view, especially in BFSI, even for insurance. If somebody X has committed frauds earlier, why would an insurer go with the same premium? Or similarly in lending, or if a PIN code at one point of time was considered a high risk area of lending, which in any business they look, we know that it happens, and now it has evolved to a non or a low risk area, the data should know. Otherwise, your agentic is as good as uh, dated. So, in my opinion, currency is required. Uh, Intelligent way of managing the memory is required, and continuous updating is required.
Super. Um, I have one last question in our first theme, which is I think we've kind of answered it in our deliberations, but it'll help to like have a quick check with each of you. Can AI itself help enforce governance? for example, through self-auditing and autonomous monitoring. I know Rohit made the point about supervisor of agents. Um, Rohit, I still didn't get whether you meant a software agent or a human agent. So you can answer that, and then we'll take in the
No,
views
no.
of
So
the
it's
other panelists.
absolutely software agent to look at. Um, but there will be edge cases where a human in the loop will be required. But software agent to look at from self auditing processes, and that will help us create traceability across. So there's synthetic traceability across each and every decision which are documented. This is what happens when you are trying. It's akin to, you know, implanting. If in a process A you have 5 people working, you're implanting 5 people brains into that and ensuring all these guardrails and traceability and decisions are there in that. So that's how you would typically do that. You will require human in the loop depending on the scenario. You would do that.
Premraj?
Yeah, I agree to what Rohit says. And in addition to that, when we talk about risk, so when we are comparing risk and trust, it all comes down to knowing the risk and mitigating those risks using the continuous learning that AI would have, and that is how the trust would be built. So risk, as we know, mostly and almost all of them are measurable, and we know how to mitigate them. When it comes to compliance, it is more of understanding the compliance aspect of compliance. What does that compliance mean, and where does it apply? That is where more supervised learning, like Rohit sir mentioned, and uh, so in those terms, supervising the actual aspect of compliance, to what extent, and where is the restriction boundary of it. That is where the data. So if you talk about the latest tools that are coming in market, they do come saying, okay, we can coagulate all the compliances for you. You can get all those understanding of those compliances, new compliances coming daily, you can bring those to you. There's a human acting behind it. You might use a happiest LLM model behind it to understand what does the complaint speak about. But then it is also about the applicability of that particular compliance to the industry, in terms of the scale of the industry and the volume that industry caters to. So it is my take is, we are still, we have just started towards it. I am sure we will build it, and that is where, like sir said, there has to be a human aspect to it. Supervising agent will build up along with the human. There will be a point where both entities intelligence might come to equality, but we are still far away from it right now.
I think more and more we are moving towards a risk-based compliance and audit, right? When you're moving towards a risk-based, and all the regulators have already started with it, right? So when you do a risk-based audit and compliance, it's all dynamic. It's not static at all. And when you're doing it dynamically, you're it's just not humanly possible, right? You more you do it through automation, better it is.
So I'll pick up 2 points from gentlemen. Supervisory control from a software agentic AI perspective, and shareability of data within the industry.
Yeah.
Now, how much can one company share outside? That's a different deliberation. But having said that, that and I'll go back to the point where I said agentic AI can align our data or align our risk to the frameworks that are there in the market. ISO 27001, I'll just pick one for. There are tools, there are which we can align it with, and then go check my entire 200,000 CIs and say where am I non-compliant and all. Having said that, that supervisory control will never go away. As the day we can build compliance itself within the code of agentic AI, we are getting there. As you rightly said, we are still far away. Um, Even the regulators use AI in some form to evaluate.
Yeah.
So why can't we be a step ahead? Supervisory control is mandatory, shareability of data, certain does to an extent in terms of incidents, but that's not
Learnings, basically,
basically
learnings.
learnings. But I don't know how the lending industry is doing it, for example, or sharing across, because everybody wants to protect their own IP,
Interest.
everybody
Yeah.
wants their own interest. So that's where I guess some level of maturity is still required. But yes, agentic AI is not going anywhere. Aging of data has to be managed, memory depending on what is required to manage. It has to get it, the behavior of compliance within the code is mandatory. That will put a lot of pressure on the service providers in terms of computing power,
Yeah.
cost, as Rohit mentioned. But yes, this is there on the table.
So the regulators do have sharing mechanisms. For example, RBI has Hunter API, you would know. IRDA has IIB, which is a bureau which gives you all the information about this. So they've taken very tangible steps in terms of sharing the data across.
Yeah.
Yes, Rajesh.
Yeah. So from a perspective of tools and technologies for governing AI and agentic, right? We've always needed tech, tools to earlier for ML, do bias detection or do drift, and accuracy, right? And if we didn't leverage tools, we always had to go back, look at how our models have deteriorated and retrain them, right? And similarly, when we are looking at um, you know the LLMs or the leveraging LLMs and agentic, right? Now an agent is nothing but an you're giving it a particular task to execute a particular task, right? And there is an guideline or a framework that you can establish around that, whether it is compliance related, whether it is risk related, right? Now if you're able to capture these logs and events, right? So essentially the metrics here around capturing the metrics around the setting of metrics, capturing the events that are occurring, right? Because ultimately if you break down this process or an agentic workflow process into metrics, you can break down to the minutest level of metrics. You can break down to all the events that are being that they are executing, whether it's an API call, whether it's a tool call, whether it's an so you can identify with that. Then granularly, once if you've been able to identify with your matrix and and the events, and you are able to log them, right? You can build a complete traceability of this entire process end to end, right? And that traceability becomes essential for us to know where is the human in the loop required, when is it moving away from an autonomous process to an human. And again, we are trying to see how to bring in more and more autonomy into the process. So the whole, when we are saying the governance itself is like it's like a manager of sorts for us here, right? And I mean, as IBM, we do offer like an platform here, what's the next governance, right? Essentially to do this, and I mean, irrespective of where your agents are, which platform they are running, right? They can capture the matrix events, logs, and give you a complete traceability of this, including trying to bring in the risk elements, which is the second step, right, of this process, where I say, how do I tackle my risks that are associated with this, so that I have the operational risk matrix, I have my also kind of scored, so that I can continuously take care of ensuring that I meet, I am within the thresholds there from risk perspective.
Super. Thanks. So now let's move on to the next theme. And to move on to the next theme, I'm going to ask Rajesh to help me segue into it. The next theme is scaling and challenges. I want to look at scaling from two specific perspectives. One perspective around the fact that digital natives in this space get data naturally in digital form, whereas today's panelists here have a fair bit of their data coming in other forms, which has to be digitized and then becomes data. But I'm sure increasingly they see more and more digital data that's coming in through their apps, through their websites, and so on. And definitely there will be a point where other input forms will be so minimal that they will be at a point where digital natives are today. So I want to look at the explosion in scaling that is required from more and more originally digital data coming in from telemetry and so on. And I also want to look at uh, one of the points that Rohit made earlier, and I was talking about it, which is there is data coming in, and when you process that data, you need more and more artifacts for traceability, observability, lineage, and so on, which means that for every new bit of data that's coming into process, just the sheer fact of governance creates more data and metadata. So there's going to be explosion from two angles. Uh, Rajesh, it will be great if you could kick off this.
Yeah. So interesting, question around scalability. Definitely, one thing that you are seeing is that one reason which we discussed in elaborate was that you don't scale because you don't trust, right? So that's one part. But the second part, which is more important, is the ability to have all my data available to me, right? Whether it is structured or unstructured, right? So one of the challenges that you mentioned was about around unstructured data that is there in the industry. And now capturing unstructured data has become easy now with a lot of models coming in that space, which are able to do entity extraction and bring in data. However, the difficult part around that is also about the how do you manage, especially when you're looking at governance, when you're looking at how do you manage your data protection, data privacy in that unstructured world of data, right? So when you really need to scale one, the ability to leverage all your data sets comes into play, right? Second, what becomes very important is, am I able to build trust on that data? So not, this is not trusting the outcome, this is trusting the input,
Right.
input that is coming in, right? How can I, so I really need to have ability to build lineage on my data sets, right? I am moving my unstructured data into an structured form by extraction. Then I am trying to combine that with some other data set to get meaningful outputs, right? So how do I build lineage? So I really need, very, very strong, I would say, AI ready, data ready foundation to be able to scale for providing these data sets into any of my agents or agentic applications, right? That's one. Second, what becomes important is, as I am building more and more data pipelines, right? Because now I am trying to bring in data from different sources. I'm building pipelines and more getting real time, because I'm saying I'll have processes which are going to autonomously drive real time. I need data which is getting fed real time. So I need my pipelines to be you know uh, observed. I need to have as little anomaly or in my pipelines. I can't go back in history and correct them, because I'm only doing BI reporting with them. I am using them in real time, right? So data observability becomes another important aspect when you're looking at scaling, right? This is one part. Second part, of course, is that when I'm trying to put moving an process earlier, where a human in the loop was always there, or you had definitely had business processes like pass-through processing and insurance, which where human may not have been there always in the loop. However, when you're looking at bringing in processes being autonomously driven, we handle the data part of it, right, on one side. On the other side, you are looking about governance matrix and that part being taken care of.
Super. So Rohit, uh, like I started at the introduction for this theme, uh, we want to talk about the two aspects of scaling. and your
I think
potential
the
concerns.
scaling is to do apart from technology, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, feasibility of technology, I think, is more or less given in terms of scaling. But in terms of scaling, there are three things. Data, I think Rajesh spoke about, right? And that's a valid concern in terms of are you able to get the data in the shape and format that you need to scale in, right? And is that data making sense or not, right? So that's one part of it. Second is cost, the cost of scaling. A lot of times these technologies literally cost a bomb and you're not able to scale because of it. The cost benefit analysis goes for a toss. And the third part of scaling is your risk appetite, your organization's risk appetite to try something new, right? So there are three parts to scale that I look at. So if I look at risk appetite, I think it's important to understand, do I want to experiment something which is very core to my business? Am I ready to experiment? What is the downfall? What are the guardrails we've built around it? It's a very risk strategy discussion from a scale standpoint. That's one. If it's cost, the cost has to justify, the cost benefit analysis has to be positive for the scale at which you're looking at. I have known organizations, and this scale is a very different question. Let me bring a nuance to the scale question as well. Uh, as known in Western atmospheres, Western side of the world, Eastern side of the world, scale is very different. When we call scale, we are talking population scale, right? And that none of these organizations have seen. They see that only in large populated regions like China and India, right? I have implemented systems where I have migrated data sets equivalent to 2-3 country population sizes, right? That's the population scale that you look at, right? And the challenges are very different, and the scale requires that kind of a cost to be built on top of it. Sometimes they are not able to. So that's the issue. Unfortunately, what we do is we pick up a very small minutiae use case and try to pilot it, and then we keep piloting it. So, my favorite byline is, you're trying to fly kites with pilot. You're not trying to actually solve a problem. Unless and until you're able to scale it properly, pilots are just parking places, nothing else.
Super. Premraj?
I agree to what Rohit sir is saying, and the point that Rohit sir has touched upon, I cannot scale if I cannot trust.
Yeah.
So if
True.
I, and that comes from data. The background of it is state data. If I don't trust the data that is coming in, I have no means of scaling, because as and when my data is going to increase, the so data is scaling, right? When I say data is increasing, data is scaling. My learning will scale. My learning will scale. It will need a scaled up infra. Now this data would scale again. Now touching upon what Rohit sir said, when I have a large population, I will get large data. So my data will scale. So uh, the cost risk that Rohit sir has talked about, spoken about, that cost, though it is large when the data becomes large, and scalability comes to a question where an organization like mine, with smaller AUM, cannot afford that cost, right, to scale in that part. That is where sharing the scalability, comes into picture. And he touched upon uh, on that topic just in the previous session, where he said RBI has this tool which is Hunter, which is a shared tool. The data that is brought in from perspective of BFSI and NBFC's learnings of compliances and policies. Uh, for especially for me, for I understand lending business, so uh, in terms of lending, what are the areas that Hunter as a tool caters to, and what my peer industries are providing inputs to this particular common group which I can use, right? So Hunter comes as a scalable shared tool for me which I can use. So I think we can move towards such innovations where we have shared responsibility of scaling, where the data collection is centralized and usable. So scalability does not come on only one company or one industry. It is shared across. So I think, yeah, scalability will happen, and we will have to be cognizant about how we'll cater to it in terms of population, like Rohit sir said.
So cost, shared data, this is all required. Having said that, can we reduce unstructured data inputs? Digitizing, that's one way. At the start of the journey of any industry, whether it is lending or banking or insurance, if it is digitized at that point itself, your unstructured data tends to go towards structured data from that point. So the load of, or I would say the quantum of unstructured data reduces. Retrievability is easier. Readability is easier. Makes more sense for these robotic AIs or to quickly do that. That's one way to handle. I'm not saying you can reduce scaling. You can scale more if the data is more structured. How do you archive and quickly retrieve when needed? Archival costs in some senses are lower than having it on live data. So it will continue to grow. Between the five of us, we probably have 100 devices at home. So it will never stop. So this is one way I think digitized input right from the beginning, and we will touch upon it more later on also, will help in the overall scaling.
If I were to ask you, what's a challenge that you face today in terms of scale?
Cost is a huge challenge. Cost, retrievability, right? And audit. Suppose banking industry requires X amount of retention period. Say 7 years ago, I need, how quickly can I pull it for the auditor? Now, if it is, and if you take a typical cloud example of AWS, uh, S3 buckets, do I put it there? Do I put it on my main data set? And Rohit has already spearheaded that. That's the challenge I see. Can I put it in a tape and leave it somewhere? And when somebody asks, it takes me 15 days to restore. Versus how I keep it and how safe is it? And can my futuristic agent read the tape? No. Again, I'll have to digitize it to make it readable. These are some of the challenges, and I think as we go along, the lesser the unstructured data, the more digitized we get to. Already it is happening, and I think that will solve some part of the problem, but it will never stop the scaling part.
I think there's a risk to over digitization. let me play devil's advocate on that side, right?
Right.
There's a risk of over digitization. We've seen it n number of times where the worldwide shutdowns which are happening more frequently now, right? Yesterday we had one. Before that we just had something else. These shutdowns will require at some point of time for you to air gap your systems and have a plan B.
Right.
That is something which is coming to cognizance across the industry very carefully now. And for that, you may build scalable systems, but you will have to protect your plan B always. We have seen geopolitical tensions affecting Indian organizations just because it had a JV, right? And we have seen that, and people have become very cognizant of that.
Sure. A very interesting point, Rohit, and I think I find it a little bit uh, dissonant for myself to look at, on the one hand, uh, the kind of scale uh, that hyperscalers can offer us versus our air-gapped arrangement. By definition, the air-gapped arrangement has to be something that's ours, practically in prem. I mean, it may not be sitting in the same office, but it's definitely got to be infrastructure that we own, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense for air gap. So are you kind of saying that we have to be able to isolate critical systems into the air gapped systems, but general
Yes,
services into
yes, we will need. So when I say air gap, it doesn't mean on-prem or on cloud. We need to keep them in a safe location, in a territorial boundary which is safer. I can safely tell you in next few years, don't want to sound like a prediction, but we will have a hyperscaler coming out of India itself.
right, right.
Yeah, so I think to that point, hybrid by design, of course, So can I be hybrid by design, which means that
Yeah.
it's easy for me to move across locations. One, second, of course, data residency and sovereignty coming in. You are right about that, and I think on the scale part, I just wanted to add one point, right? I think one important part about scale, while we have trust, data, risk association, cost, these are all elements which are obviously determining why I should do something. At the end of the day, it's investment and return. One factor that can actually change or look at scalability is how do I design for in entirety for a business, right? So some of the cases that I've read about is that are businesses trying to carve out one portion of a small business to try and see can this completely be run autonomously, right? So it becomes not just an experimentation, but holistically they're doing it there. So to your point on one use case versus for my business, right? One use case will never give me that scale or opportunity. So I need to look at platform approach and see how I can scale it for my business as a whole, right? So not look at one use case, but look at the entire. So it's almost like rethinking the way people thought when they implemented ERPs, right? They had physical processes, manual processes, and then they when they moved to an ERP, it was a complete business process re-engineering. Either you adopted to the ERP or you said no, I do my BPR and then deploy. So this is almost, again, you're on the same stage where you may want to rethink business and say how do I redeploy to benefit out of it.
Something you said just struck me. I was in a roundtable discussion a couple of weeks back on FinOps on the cloud, and somebody made the point about making the same mistakes all over in the cloud,
All over the cloud,
right?
yeah.
This looks to be one of those things where from an you made the point about are we over digitizing things, and perhaps it's a mistake that we are making all over again in terms of
No, so
if
I
you
think
did a I remember this is my favorite example, right? You in the days of paper, if you had to go to the passport office to renew your passport, you needed to give one set of some papers to them. You're overly compliant in the sense that if they are asking for 3 documents, you will have 4. They would have asked one set, but you will take 2 sets with you. Just imagine that digitally, right? I mean, it's just explodes, and that's also kind of contributes to the kind of scale problem that we're talking about. Sorry, Rohit, you were saying something.
no. I think from the hyperscaler example that I was picking up, and the fact that it's a question of maturity curve of organizations from a technology standpoint. Also, people have take gone up the maturity curves from a FinOps standpoint and scale standpoint, tying it to the scale. They've just first thrown the furniture around and then they started arranging it, and they're trying to figure out what is needed and what is not needed, right? So we are over with the first phase, hopefully, with most of the organizations. They've thrown the furniture around. Now they're trying to figure out what needs to be done and what. Otherwise, you will always have leaking S4 buckets and things like that, which lead to data breaches all across. That is also one of the clear if scale, uh, unprecedented scale without any governance is one of the reasons for data breaches.
Uh, Premraj, from your point of view, your biggest challenge on scaling?
My biggest challenge on scaling is at the first point itself. Like I said, my data is still unstructured. So, structuring the data, and as and when this data collection increases, the scalability will be a question. So, at the first entry itself, whether the input is right or not, that's the first thing. Even if I am using AI to have those OCRing done, NER implemented, NLP understood, all those data when it comes in, those data will have to be uh, first moderated in terms of whether the data has landed up correctly at the correct place. Right? So again, efforts and time in the structuring of the data. So time is cost for the industry. So as and when collection of building of the structured data goes on, the cost will increase. That is where scalability also will come into picture. And with scalability, my security of data will come into question. So as more the data I start accumulating at a place, right? A secured, scalable cloud, whether you call it cloud or an hybrid or an indigenous cloud or on-premises infra. So cost will always be a factor associated with the generation and accumulation of data is the challenge that I see.
Rohit, I know that you gave us a kind of framework to think about scaling, but in terms of challenges, what's your greatest challenge?
I think cost
Okay.
one, and the scale requires a certain bit of optimization to go hand in hand. You can't just scale relentlessly, right? So you need to optimize. For example, if I'm scaling a system, I cannot just keep adding on top of
Right.
it, right? So that optimization itself is something that has to go hand in hand when we do scaling. Otherwise, it will be inefficient. Just a generation away. Generation means 3 years in tech. So just a, just 3 years, it will be inefficient scale at some, and then you will be struggling with managing that with the entire data all over the place. You start taking convenient turns to manage things, right? And that convenience turns into tech legacy going forward when you do scaling. So how do you avoid convenience and take some hard paths to scale is what is a challenge.
When we started on this theme, Rohit, you mentioned appetite for risk to scale. Um, that's a very human thing, right? Like the other two reasons are very corporate things, whereas appetite for risk is a very human thing. Um, if I were to break that appetite for risk into two sides, meaning there is your investor stakeholder side, which I will take as a given for all of us, meaning that irrespective of our own personal views, that happens. So if there is appetite for risk, we'll go out and scale. If there is not that much appetite for risk, we won't go out and scale. That's fine. Let's come to the personal part of it. And I'm sure that as executives sitting in this panel, I will take it as a given that all five of us, as individuals and as leaders, have appetite for risk. But what happens around our teams? In terms of scaling, what does our team's thinking and our team's motivations?
No, I think team motivation is very clear. If you don't, if you don't grow your systems, if you don't grow you also don't grow. So people associate the teams, associate themselves with their systems. It's almost like a alter ego, right? In that sense. So they kind of look at their systems as their systems, and as the system grows, they also grow along with it. So personally, that risk is inherent in all professionals who work in this area.
So you started with personal, I mean, individual risk, and then
Yes.
you asked the question about
Teams.
individuals.
No,
So
I kind of said I spoke for everybody in saying individually we are all we all have the appetite for risk.
yeah.
Of course,
So
I
yeah,
should ask you whether you do have the appetite for risk, but also about the teams. Yes.
so my appetite for risk, again, that strength comes into me from the organization. I mean, the trust that my organization bestows on me, right? So I'll go to Rajesh sir's example of trusting a person. If he is able to spend 2,000 correctly, I'll start giving him 10,000 to spend correctly. So that is the line that I think will be applicable to everyone, whether it is team or the organization or me as an individual. So and that will happen only with experience, along with everyone knowing the experience and learning about how things went, whether it was a good learning, whether it was a bad learning, what were the outcomes, whether the investment was fruitful. So there's always that the appetite for risk is always there, but there's a margin decided, there's a threshold decided within the organization, what part of investment I can invest into risking things. So whether it is technology, whether it is business process reengineering, whether it is human skills built up, all those aspects, everything has the risk aspect associated, and the cost of the risk is the with the threshold, right? As an individual, I'll have a threshold for accepting that risk. Beyond that, it is again on my team, on my seniors to decide and then go ahead. So yeah.
Leadership culture, confidence levels, and skills. In my view, uh, a combination of this decides how risk hungry we are, regardless of whichever organization. If I have the backing, I will take a risk.
Right.
If I have the confidence that if I don't know, I learn, I can take a risk. I don't have the skill, I build it or I hire it, we can take a risk. But we have to continuously take risks in some form or the other to stay ahead of the curve.
Super. Rajesh,
Absolutely.
you meet a lot of clients who are on the threshold of scaling or who are on the upward path in scaling. Uh, is there anything special that you've seen? Is there anything that was noteworthy that you would like to share with this group?
In the context of risk or in the context of adoption?
In the context of scaling.
In the context of scaling. Okay. So one thing that I have, so this problem, runs with every enterprise, right? First is who takes the first step,
Right.
because the first step is the risky step, because either the industry does not have an experience to take from, so I am the first one to do it, right? But the advantage of being the first one to do it is you'll be ahead of the curve, right? With some additional costs initially, because obviously, like you said, optimization happens over time. So there will be some initial upfront costs that you would have, but the risk is imminent because, but you have to take the risk because you want to stay
Right.
ahead there, right? All the same, how do you balance this, right? So I think the organizations that I have seen try to balance this is, one is, of course, they've taken a conscious call that they want to automate a particular process, say bring in technology in the picture. How they have mitigated the risk there is to go with, I would say, data, right? Now data in terms of, say I'll just use an example of how many errors did an human do while conducting the same process.
Right.
This is an engineering problem in an engineering industry, not BFSI though, but I'm saying how many, and then they realized that when they started putting the tool to, you know use in this, and found the number of accuracies, or the accuracy here. They found that the manual process had higher inaccuracies than the AI process that is built in here. So the data point there gave them the confidence of moving forward. And where did they get the data from? The data point is coming from the matrices that I am capturing, and the matrices is from my governance platform. This is so governance becomes very important in the scheme of things. Second part is, I've seen some of the enterprises who've gone in. They've gone in for an entire process to be taken onto, like I've jumped technology there.
Right.
Not I would not just put a bot to answer a customer query, right? It doesn't help much. So I would rather automate the entire process of customer service.
Right.
So whether it's internal agents, whether it is externally facing, or I want to even allow certain processes which can be conducted autonomously. So I will cater to all of it together.
Right.
Second and third, I've seen one thing is about looking at very seriously considering a platform approach to which enables you to not just deploy AI models, allows you to build agents, right? And necessarily also bring in the whole governance framework within. So
Right.
like governance, as you all said today, has to be embedded in the process, embedded at the time of building that model, embedded at the time of consuming that model, and embedded at the time of consuming that data. So I think having a platform where you are able to bring in all of these three elements becomes important. So I've seen one organization taken a long time, but at this point in time they've deployed say 6 processes in one business area and getting productivity benefits. Right.
Super. Now it's time for us to move to the final theme. Eh, I understand that given that you are from a highly regulated industry, you might not want to comment specifically on policy or approaches to policy. But what I'd like to ask about in terms of regulations and governance from the topmost level is more around our approach to preparing for it. So, I'm definitely not asking you to comment on policy or approach to policy. Again, I'm repeating that. Our preparation. So, for example, when we knew the DPDP app was coming through, we already had some benchmark around GDPR. So, even when we knew there was going to be a Data Protection and Data Privacy Act, even before we did not know the specific provisions in it, we said, okay, GDPR kind of model is something that we should prepare for. So let's prepare for it. And when the actual uh, terms came in, we were better prepared for it, is what I would say. And it's easier for us to actually follow it. So this discussion is along those lines, meaning how do we prepare for it? So as of now, there is the only kind of overall act that I can think of is the EU's AI Act. There is some work happening in Australia. There's some work that's happening particularly in California in the US. But the US thing is very, very political right now. So we actually don't know how that will go. Um, I'm sure given the rapid adoption of AI, agentic AI systems doing multiple things, and particularly with the agentic browsers that have been released. So, for example, again, in the particularly in the BFSI segment, uh, if we are dealing with our bank today, our bank apps prohibit screenshots. Our bank web apps don't allow you to paste something onto it. You'll have to type it in yourself. So very clearly, these are systems that are designed specifically for human beings to interact with it. But if you take an agentic browser, uh, you're going to give it everything it needs to do this, but just in the off case that something went wrong, right? The bank is going to say, you accepted the terms of conditions, you put in the captcha, you put in the OTP. As far as we are concerned, everything is fine. The agentic browser company is going to say, hey, we have no liability on this. And the customer is left holding the ball, right? Now, definitely at scale, the government's going to step in to say something around, hey, perhaps this is how either banks have to deal with agents, or agentic browsers have to deal with banks, or to tell the consumer, hey, if you're using an agentic browser, you are on your own, we can't do anything about it because you're not supposed to be using it. I'm just laying it out. So in those terms, in that kind of scenario, around agents, around now, like I said, I was just giving examples, but we'll speak about your internal processes. What is the kind of preparation that you foresee for this agentic age? Pushkal, will go with you first.
So, in regulated environments, uh, if it's a no, it's a no.
Right.
Right? If
Sorry to interrupt, but the point that I'm making right now is we don't know it's a no as of now,
it is the industry that should decide.
which is also fine. But right now, given that we don't know what the industry's proposals are and we don't know what the government is proposing, what is your approach to preparing for this?
I would err on the side of caution.
Okay.
Right? I would start with a no first. If it is something which I cannot see the risk in it, I'd rather not get into it at this point of time. As an industry, having said that, there should be other guardrails and checks within your risk management and the governance models where governance gets into the code itself to check that. Now, there is a purpose why the industry is regulated. We should
Absolutely.
not try to impose no deviations to
Correct.
just because they're outliers. You should not do that. Let's not break the system. Trust. The moment the something goes wrong, the customer trust is lost. We all run here for business. Technology is not the customer's problem. Technology is the industry's problem. But not problem, I would say, is the industry's prerogative. Whichever. So, end of the day, if you think it should not happen, by all means, it should not happen. Unless we are at a maturity level where things can be controlled, I would start with a no first at a micro level, and then probably each industry or each organization will do that. That's how I see this developing.
So, like you said, GDPR was already there, and we were getting literated about data privacy, and DPDP even now being coming into picture. Data privacy was always a matter of trust between the user and the provider. Uh, and then when we say user and provider, the literacy has to be on both the side. So I think this regulations are always for the betterment of usage of data, and that is where they will always enforce, like you said, zero trust at the start is the way to go. The literacy has to be on both the sides. Uh, the provider, the service provider, and the consumer who's consuming the service. What kind of data is being provided? What kind of data has to be restricted in the boundary? What kind of data has to be used for what intent? That is where consumer consents also then come into picture. So when a bank asks me whether I can use your PAN for verifying your CIBIL, that is a consent taken from you, and I consent to it as a consumer. I'll consent to it, and that is when only then the bank can use my data to get my CIBIL. So literacy in terms of collection of data, in terms of usage of data, that has to come on both the sides, and then uh, the aspects of securing those data when collected, where regulation is already coming, with all the compliances and guidelines, which obviously everyone has to follow. There will be learnings from the industry that which the regulators will gather, and more again, come up with more improved and stringent guidelines, uh, if not stringent, but more uh, comprehensive and uh, context contextual guidelines. Right now, the DPDP will be applicable pan India for all industries. But then when we speak about sectorial, BFSI being the sector which has most of the PI data collected, health system are slowly building up, where health records also would start getting collected. So the regulations will start building up on those aspects also. So I think uh, literacy is the main concept that has to be provided on both the sides.
True, true. Thank you. Rajesh?
Yes, see, from a perspective of data, right? Privacy. I think, irrespective of the framework around policy, right? I mean, this is a DPDP is an act which will come out now, right?
Yes.
And GDPR possibly existed earlier, and however, even otherwise, right? If I asked you my number, you may not want to give my number to somebody else. It is, because it's private to me and you, that understanding that you have the number. And this, I guess, works for an organization as well, right? And when the organization is collecting data, consent, no consent, that is one part of the guideline. But the point of how do I handle data? How do I do my data governance, right? Now, data governance is a practice, and I as an organization have to have a practice in place where I'm able to at any point in time discover and classify my data for PII or sensitive data. I should be in a position to do the policy enforcement, right, across my data that is lying with me, whether that policy enforcement is for an agent to consume, a human to consume, right, an application to consume, irrespective, right?
Right.
And what is required to build that built-in privacy, it has to be an by design. So privacy by design, right, which means am I going to give this, like I go look for Aadhaar data now. Earlier when I went to Aadhaar site, it would give me all my 12 digits like that, right? Nowadays they don't. They do a hash for the initial ones, right? So by design, can I build a system where I know that these data sets never have to be shown or appear to these sets of consumers, right? Even when an application consumes for the sake of authentication, it could always use an encrypted data also to do it. So by design. So now here is where I would think that every organization, irrespective of DPDP, needs to possibly think about a very, very strong data governance layer to be able to discover, classify, build this policy and enforce these policies, and design privacy by design.
Uh,
Uh, I have a few points on this, and let me take it on first principles, right? Since you've gone a couple of revolutions around the sun further on in future, I will tell you, we have to have in future, there will be not customers, there will be customers agents whom you will be interacting with. When you have a customer's agent to interact with, our systems are not ready for it. We'll have to build our systems to be interacting with customers' agents. That means something called role-based agent control. And when we talk about role-based agent control, means that there's a role of a customer's agent which is coming in, what permissions you give, what integrations they're going to go, what classification of data is accessible to, is all identified. And then you give him access in a guarded, controlled way. That's a couple of revolutions away from sun, but
yes.
yeah, but that's exactly where this is going on to, when you will be having customers, agents. With so much of consumerization of agents, right? I know of my neighbors and my colleagues who are building and non-tech people who are building their own agents. It is inevitable that they will have their agents doing some pieces of interaction with either BFSI or other kind of a consumer
Right.
industries as well. You need to build systems for that.
Correct.
And that's where the change will come.
Super. I wanted to bring this theme to a close with something that I read a long time back. Uh, I forget who said it, but they said character is how you behave when you know nobody is watching, right? Um, this preparation for regulation is kind of like that, in the sense that you design for what you believe is the right thing for you to do for your users and consumers. Um, then you're largely in line, because that's the aim of the policy also, that companies do the good, whatever is best for their users and consumers. Um, so with that, we come to the end of this panel. I wanted to thank you all, but before we close out, if I could ask each of you one idea that you are taking away from today's deliberations. Pushkal, will start with you.
I think scalability,
Yeah.
guardrails, um, and the need to build compliance within the system. That would be my idea.
The learning that I taking from this session is, having AI capabilities for uh, implementation of compliances across the organization. That is a possibility that we are thinking,
Right.
in those directions, and it is helpful so what I learn is it will be helpful for the company, because how much of a human we try to have compliance and risk addressed and enforced on, will with this agentic thing coming into compliance and governance, and based on the learnings that it gets, it it will definitely help me as a person to have systems which will keep me under check, where I'll know I am not allowed to cross the boundary. That is a good learning for me from this session.
Rohit?
I think interesting discussion to look at governance by design in AI. I think that is what is critical for all of us. It has to be by design. It cannot be a post facto, process which runs on governance. And you'll have to create autonomous supervisory governance mechanisms to manage this.
Rajesh?
Yeah, I think I'm, in line
All
with
of those
everyone
things.
in terms of, everyone believing that, we definitely need to embed governance as part of the overall, process. And I think the, pragmatic approach to adopting,
Yeah.
agent, while it's inevitable, but, I think everybody has a pragmatic view to
Yeah.
approaching this, and keeping in mind the necessary guardrails to be built and the governance frameworks to be built.
Yeah. So for me, the big takeaway was the how practical you've all been in terms of agentic AI. But far more than that is, I have to say, a very clear idea of what you want to do next. Uh, Many times when we are at a space like this, point like this in terms of technology development, we sometimes have too many options. But each of you, despite the too many options, you have a very clear idea of what you want to do next. And that actually means that we are now beyond the labs for this particular technology, and um, we're ready to scale pretty much. And thank you so much
Thank you.
for giving us this opportunity to host all of you. I learned a lot personally. I have 3 or 4 things that I took as very specific learnings that I want to explore from this point onwards. One is definitely the concept of governance at the edge. One is Premraj's point around we how we need to actually over-invest in data readiness. We need to. And Pushkal, definitely your views on risk and trust being two sides of the same coin. Trust is something that you project, but risk is something you manage. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for having us.
Thank you
you.
so much.